Hey, Happy New Year to everybody. Really thrilled to be here in 2021. Let me know if you are here with us live or if you are joining us on the replay. I welcome any questions you've got. If you don't know me, my name's Christine Barnes. I'm a naturopath with a master's degree in wellness. And many thanks to Megan and her team for inviting me into your life today on this wonderful page and fantastic community we have. So today's topic is not exactly dinner party conversation. So we're going to talk about constipation, what it is, what the foundations are that we need to avoid feeling constipated or experiencing constipation, and what we can do to help alleviate that problem, because it affects so much of our life, our energy, our cognition. Absolutely everything is affected by the quality of our bowel movements or evacuation. That's another way to term it. So number one, we want to have a healthy bowel movement every single day. So if we're not having a movement, and I'm going to talk about volume and quality and all sorts of detail that you probably haven't wanted to discuss previously, but we do want to have a bowel movement every single day. It should be easy to pass. It should be relatively quickly evacuation, so literally just a whoop and it's out. Shouldn't be any pain, and we'll talk about some of the definitions of quality of evacuation. So if you're not having a healthy evacuation, or you're not sure if you're having a healthy evacuation, you're like many people, and I speak to people every day about what their bowels look like, the quality, the frequency, the measurement, all sorts of things. So I'm based here in Australia. I'm in Queensland, Australia. So if you're listening in from another country, you'll hear me talk about inches, centimeters, because I'm so old. I remember when here it was pre-metric, so it can be a little bit confusing. You'll hear me talk about liters. We've got fantastic tools nowadays, so you can just convert that to fluid ounces when I'm talking about hydration, etc. So apologize in advance if I'm not speaking in your local measurement, etc. Okay, so let's get down to it, shall we? So a bowel movement should happen every day, every single day. And if you're having an occasional missed day, that's what I, as a naturopath who specializes in complex health and gut issues, I would consider you constipated. Now, most people only think they're constipated when they don't have a bowel movement for a few days or ever, or once a week. And trust me, that's not where you want to be heading with bowels. You want to have a bowel movement every single day. Now, a lot of people have a bowel movement every day, but they don't have very much bowel movement. And I would also consider that constipated. Or they have a bowel movement where it's not a healthy quality or shape or things like that. And that could be considered constipated or diarrhea. But today we're talking about constipation and all the various aspects of it. So I want to talk about a couple of little tools that I use in my clinic. Now, you've probably got a paper towel roll at home, and there is a center to that. So that's literally the paper towel roll. And one day I was looking at the paper towel roll and I just went, that's really interesting. That's about the size of the evacuation that we want to strive for every single day, and the diameter. So if you look at when I put my finger in that A-OK, yeah, it's about that diameter. Try and get that in the camera there. Okay, so that's what we're seeking. Now, often I show people that and they're really shocked and they're like, oh, I do have a bowel movement every day, therefore I'm not constipated, but I only have that much bowel movement, or it'll be that diameter. Okay, So just to give you an idea there, that's the sort of volume. Now I meant to have a Cavendish banana to show you, but I was too busy this morning to get out and to the shop and grab one to show you. But if next time you're at the fruit shop, have a look at those big Cavendish bananas, and we want it that sort of shape. We want to have everything that when you're looking at the bowel movement, it's all, digested and smooth and not shiny. Shiny means we're not absorbing our fats, but not too unformed. But there's lots of different variations in our bowel movement shape, color, and consistency that also reflect what's happening with our digestion. So I'm just going to show you, this is the Bristol stool chart, and I hope you can see some of the descriptions here. This is rabbit poo, so this is what we would experience if we're dehydrated or we've got a deficiency in some of the beneficial bacteria that we require. Also, if we're low in serotonin, we can produce a bowel movement that looks like that, or even like this, which is really this, only then all stuck together. So still constipated, so constipated, still constipated when it's like this. This has got the descriptions for kids, which is corn on the cob. So still constipated. And I'm going to talk about why. Now, this is more the shape we're seeking. So remember, we wanted that diameter and that length. And you can see it's more Cavendish banana shape there. Now, this is an unhealthy bowel movement. So this is loose bowels, unformed loose bowels, a different shape of loose bowels, and porridge, which is another shape of loose bowels. And we'll talk about loose bowels on a different Facebook Live. So yeah, you can see that there's quite a few variations. So even if you are having a bowel movement every day, if it's not adequate evacuation, we're not detoxing appropriately, and that's when we can build up heavy metals, estrogens, toxicity that we need to be evacuating every single day. Now, also, we shouldn't be experiencing cramping or, bloating or nausea, anything around the bowel movement. And some people who have dysbiosis will experience possibly cramping just before a bowel movement or just after. That's when it's very irritated. And certainly we can get cramps before a bowel movement or in between bowel movements if we are experiencing dehydration or lack of fiber. And I'm going to talk about fiber at length. And we want to have, once we've actually had that evacuation, so that's a relaxation of the anal sphincter, and then it pulls back up. And this is parasympathetic nervous system and then sympathetic nervous system. And we should then feel a little bit more energy. So again, feeling constipated or not having healthy bowel movements can negatively impact on our energy and our cognition. And having a bowel movement sounds like, it's a simple thing that everybody should be doing daily, normally, blah, blah, blah. But it actually takes a real symphony of things, activities for that to happen. We need adequate hydration, adequate nutritional levels to feed the microbiome to do its work to help that breaking down of food and adequate evacuation. We need a healthy nervous system, so it needs to have the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system needs to be in rhythm. And, the things that we often don't think about is we need to feel relatively relaxed, and we need to have the right balance of calcium and magnesium. A lot of people I meet are actually taking a lot of magnesium or a lot of vitamin C to keep their bowels, flowing. It's very hard on the bowel movement, and it can create a secondary imbalance nutritionally. Magnesium oxide, famous for being able to move the bowels relatively quickly, but also very hard on the stomach, can cause secondary digestive issues. Now, there's a lot of fancy diagnostic names for really constipation. Yeah, so when we attend a medical doctor, sometimes we'll have terms used like gastroparesis. Yeah, that's commonly associated with bowel motions that aren't healthy, that has a combination of things that are happening upper in the digestion. So usually it starts with, say, a silent reflux or a reflux. You may not even know that you've got it, and then that creates misfiring of signals that's really not telling our digestion, liver, gallbladder, pancreatic enzymes to fire off at the right time. And it's also not telling the bowels to be doing this lovely soft motion that they should be doing. So either we're then getting this motion or this motion or this motion. So we want it to be like this. And the bowels are muscle. So this is part of we want to have the right calcium magnesium ratio, but we also want to have the right level of exercise and relaxation. So you can see when I talk about a symphony, it truly is a symphony, and something that needs to be coordinated and with the right combination of optimal wellness levels, we can actually experience quite a nice bowel movement, and it should be nice, yeah? So keep that in mind. So if any of this is ringing true for you and you feel that you're hydrated and exercising and not too stressed and all those sorts of things, and you're still having trouble with your bowel movement, it may require us to look a bit deeper, yeah? And we can do that these days. We have some fantastic testing tools that we can test the microbiome, your nervous system, and your minerals to see if all of these things are at an optimal level for you. So please don't hesitate to get in contact if you've got any questions about that, and I'll talk a little bit about that testing a little bit later. So let's talk about some of the foundational things. Yeah? So water. We need 2 litres of water a day for adults. Now, there may be some people with kidney issues that may need less because of other things. People with 1 kidney, for instance, that may need looking at and judging whether that's the right water for you. So in general, if there's nothing else that we need to be aware of, we're talking about 2 litres of water a day. Now, 2 litres of water a day, and you run marathons every day, or you're in a spa, a hot spa, or a steam room, we may need to add some electrolytes and have more than 2 litres. Once we get over 2 litres, if we're having pure water, we can actually flush out our minerals and create a secondary issue. But for healthy bowel movement, we want to have 2 litres of water a day, because that large intestine, when the chime hits that large intestine, partially when it's squeezing like this, it's squeezing out the water. And if we don't have enough water in there, it's squeezing, and then the stool gets stuck. And we can have partial impaction, and then the bowel movement goes around that impaction, and we don't necessarily even know we've got it. That can happen in a lot of autism spectrum cases. We see it as very common, and there are other things, complex things that are going on there. So water, and I would suggest in my clinic, and I'm going to take a sip of water, so if you've got a glass of water, and I hope you do, take a sip. So it can be very, very challenging keeping up with our adequate water intake, but the bowels are highly dependent on 2 litres of water a day, and it's the most common deficiency I see in my clinic, either overhydration without added minerals and electrolytes, or inadequate hydration. And when I've got a case where we're not having healthy bowel movements, that's the first goal we're looking for. So let's now talk about diet. So some people have a microbiome imbalance called SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth. They can have problems with fiber, but it depends on the type of bowel overgrowth. Some people have problems with polyphenols involved with plant foods. I'm leaving all of those out today. They're all part of a bigger conversation, but generally fiber, we want to have the right mix of soluble and insoluble fibers to be able to be that broom as it's going through the bowels, and help us detoxify. And part of the role that fiber plays is helping us move those bowels and avoiding constipation. Now, a lot of people think when they're eating breads that they're having fiber that helps with bowel movements, but because of highly processed grains, we often find that too much processed foods, such as white bread, can be a problem and causing constipation. For some people, dairy can cause constipation, and for some people, too much saturated fat, in particular trans fats or fats from fast foods, can cause constipation. But paradoxically, also a low-fat diet can cause constipation. Now, we're talking a little bit now about individualized diets. So some people need to be on some of those specialty diets for other health reasons. So, that requires coming to see a nutritionist like myself, making sure that the diet fits with you, and we may need to put some things in place to make sure that the bowels are still working, even though you may need to be on a low-fat diet because of some other diagnosis, like Crohn's, for instance. Some people need to be on a very high-fat diet because of things like epilepsy, inadequate support for hormones. There's all sorts of other reasons that we might be prescribing a particular diet. But always, no matter what the style of diet you're on, we want the diet to fit with your diagnosis, and also we need to ensure that we've got bowels that are healthy and moving along. So we need to have adequate fiber. So generally speaking, we're looking for 6 handfuls. So 4 to 6, I like to think as an average, of handfuls in ratio to the size of your body. Now, depending on how close I am to the camera, you can see that alters. But that, I always like to think a handful is an upside down spider. So that, handful is in ratio to my body. So I'm always seeking 4 to 6 handfuls of vegetables a day. And that helps with my fiber content. So very important. And that ratio of 4 to 6 handfuls of vegetables a day is also very helpful for managing a healthy microbiome. So the microbiome needs 40 plus different foods a week. So starting off with adequate vegetable volume and then seeking variety as a secondary thing is really important. And I can talk more about that in the future and future Facebook groups. So if you've got any questions, please shoot them through to me. Always happy to chat about questions and see what I can. And even if you're listening to the recording, just tag me. Happy to pop in and respond if I can, if I have the answers. So let's talk about constipation and gut dysbiosis. But before I want to go there, I want to talk about hemorrhoids. Another not very good dinner party conversation. Okay, this is just us in our little group here talking, privately. This is not dinner party conversation. So hemorrhoids come from when we have lack of venous integrity. So it can be purely from that, but generally speaking, it's from too much pressure because the bowel movement at some time in our life has been too hard to pass, and that we're doing too much bearing down and forcing that, really pushing that through. So again, if you have hemorrhoids and you think you're not constipated, there are some great herbal remedies for hemorrhoids that we ingest actually to help venous integrity, and they work very well. And there's a lot of things that we can do to heal hemorrhoids, but also we want to make sure that, even if you are having a daily bowel movement, maybe that microbiome needs some addressing and some work on. So we may need to do a little bit of work with getting that bowel movement really optimal for you. And that's very important if you've even had a history of hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids are very common in postmenopausal. Of course, pregnancy, it's a common thing for people to get. as well for women to get. Men lifting things that they shouldn't and not having the right venous integrity can be problematic as well. So if you've had a history of hemorrhoids, it's even more important that we make sure that we treat the hemorrhoids, but also that our bowel movement is healthy, adequate, easy to pass, no constipation. So let's get on and chat about gut dysbiosis and SIBO. I actually put them under the same umbrella because they're basically gut infections. Now, how do they happen? I think that's a good topic to bring up. It's a big topic, and hopefully this year I'm going to have the opportunity, with Megan's permission, to chat with all of our community here about, what's led to this? How did this happen? I was chatting with a person earlier today, and they said they went through a very stressful year, working extremely long hours, then had a gut infection, and then things have never been well since. I cannot tell you how frequently I hear that. And it's really all about that year of stress. Yeah. Some people it's a few months of stress, but it all starts there. Now, sometimes it can start before that, and the stressful event is just the straw that breaks the camel's back, and then we get an infection that further takes us down that spiraling down, and then we're stuck in that situation where we've got limited food intake, or we've got to be careful about the foods, and we're having all sorts of funny things go on with our bowel movements, and our digestion is uncomfortable. But generally, we need to look at the diet and hydration, because the diet and hydration and exercise and how we feel all affects the bacteria. So it can actually stimulate pathogenic overgrowths and can also kill off beneficial bacteria that we need to have those healthy bowel movements. Also, stress can cause us to flush out all of our healthy, health-giving minerals. And you heard me mention calcium, magnesium earlier. So too much calcium, a lot of people are taking calcium supplements without knowing their tissue calcium level. So calcium, magnesium have this relationship where it's got a relaxation or a contraction and a relaxation aspect within the musculature. And the bowel is just a big long pipe of muscle. So we want to make sure those supportive aspects are at the Goldilocks level. So calcium, magnesium levels can be checked by a tissue mineral analysis. It's quite convenient. I always recommend people just get that for illness prevention, just to see how they're absorbing and adjust their diet to fit with it. It's quite economical. It's non-invasive, costs $150. And yeah, it's really helpful. So calcium, magnesium levels and their ratio also affect bowel movements. So we often think about calcium just in relation to teeth and bones. Very important, don't get me wrong. And of course, there's cofactors involved with all of that as well. So too much or too little calcium is going to have a negative effect on our bowels. So we need to know about that as well. So also the microbiome, you hear me bang on about that a lot. So, the microbiome can have a sedentary effect on the bowel movement or an overstimulation effect. Now we're talking about that sedentary effect. So think about sleepy bowel, sedation. So, and that's one of the roles that excess calcium can play. We can also have lazy bowel because from a lot of different reasons, overuse of laxatives, we can create a lazy bowel. Also from lack of exercise, we can create a lazy bowel. There are many underlying drivers that can cause that. So then we've got to wake up those nerve endings in the nervous system, not only get the microbiome in the right balance, but everything else. So let's talk about that microbiome in relation to constipation a little bit more in depth. I'm going to talk about some crazy names. So the microbiome has a language all of itself. Now, certainly a deficiency in lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. I'm sure you've heard about those two beneficial bacteria. Can slow bowels, yeah, and also negatively affect how we break down nutrients if we don't have adequate levels. So they're the good guys we often talk about, yeah. But there are a couple that really can impact on the bowel movement, in particular constipation. So a decrease in Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. You don't have to remember that, but we call it prausnitzii for short. So if we've got a deficiency in that, that can slow bowel movements. An increase in pathogenic bacteria such as Pseudomonas aeruginosa, that can slow bowel movements. Now there's a lot of different combination of the microbiome, and it's large and complex, so I'm just naming a couple of those. You never want to look at the microbiome in isolation and just talk about one bacteria, because there's the ratios between them and a lot of other things that go on. But just to name a couple that can negatively impact and drive constipation. Now, when we have overproduction or a lack of being able to process methane, it can slow transit time. So methane is one of the measures when we talk about testing SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth. So methane is a common one for creating slow bowel movements. Now, microbiome, so the bigger picture of the microbiome, can be tested. It's a wide variety of price points in testing. Basically, the more money you pay, the more information you get. I find investing around $340 gives you a lot of information to work with. But they can start from $150 for microbiome testing. SIBO testing is around that $200 mark, depending again how much information we want, how comprehensive, but around that $200 mark. It's a breath test, whereas a microbiome test is done with a poo sample, so a bowel sample. So yeah, some of the more in-depth things and some of the testing that we can do to help establish what's going on for your bowels and what's going on overall with your health and wellness levels. But let's get back to the minerals. I'm very passionate about getting minerals optimized. So the calcium, magnesium, too much calcium can have an inhibitory effect on what's called peristalsis. So that's that gentle movement that we want to achieve, yeah? So we want the squeezing relaxation of that long tube that is our bowels. So we don't inhibit that, and we want to optimize that. Now here's some other ones that a lot of people don't realize can negatively impact on bowel movements. So deficiencies in B12, vitamin D can inhibit bowel movement. Yeah, so interestingly, there's a correlation there, B12 and gastroparesis, and also that upper digestive aspect. It's all dependent on B12. Other B groups as well, vitamins. There's not enough time in the day to talk about all the other aspects, but I'm just giving you some highlights of things that are helpful to check in on. B12 and vitamin D, simple blood test. Vitamin D can also be done with a skin prick test these days, finger prick test, so you can do it at home and send that test result into the lab. Lots of wonderful tools we have these days to check these things. Here's an interesting one though. Too much iron, so iron toxicity. And I see this when people are fatigued. They'll often go, I'm fatigued, I must be low in iron, and, you know, chug down a lot of iron supplementation and end up with slow bowel movements or constipation. So that's another one, check in on that one. Now stress. Stress is something I bang on a lot about in my clinic and in my podcasts and whenever I'm chatting to people, because I really believe that it is an underlying driver in so many health issues, in particular in constipation. It can also play a role in loose bowels. So, you know, this is where it depends on whether we've got constant irritable bowel, C, or irritable bowel that's diarrhea, yeah, D. So, you know, they all come under the umbrella of irritable bowel, but really they should be called stress bowel or something like that. I don't think irritable bowel defines it enough. So anxiety can cause a lot of changes in our body, including reducing our stomach acid. And if our stomach acid isn't strong enough, it can change the signaling, and this is where we can get a negative impact on motility. So really, having a healthy bowel movement starts right up here at the mouth, chewing, being relaxed, swallowing, then the stomach, having the right bile produce pancreatic enzymes. This is this symphony I talk about. Timing has to be right, the right volume. We've got to have what my husband always calls beautiful notes in a music lesson. That's sort of what we need in our digestion as well. A sedentary lifestyle, or sitting around too much. Now, we all do it. I do it. I sit around a lot because I'm sitting here right now. I do have a standing desk, and I can go through days and forget to use it. I get stuck in and focused and forget. So I'm sure you can all relate to that a little bit. So I try and get up a lot, and there's a long hallway here, so quite often I'm running up and down the hallway, grabbing things and what I need. But I make sure every morning, like clockwork, I go for a walk. I get a bit of sweat up when I'm walking, so I get a bit of speed up. I also do exercises where I'm lifting my legs, sort of like a marching person, where they lift their legs high. Now, if you have problems with getting around or any pain, you can do these types of things laying on your back. You can do them in your recliner. You can lift those knees up and bring them up close to you. There's all variations. You can also do these sorts of things in a chair, so it doesn't necessarily need to be traditional walking, but we need to get that squeezing relaxation and get that breath working, because that diaphragm is pumping the liver, the stomach, all that sort of thing. So it helps us with that symphony of our digestion. Now let's talk a little bit, in the little bit of time I've got left, on secondary causes of constipation. Hypothyroid, so underactive thyroid, can play a role in slowing bowels. So if you're experiencing a slow thyroid, you probably are experiencing inadequate evacuation. And so if you're having treatment for your thyroid and you're on that journey, you may want to look at putting some things in place to make sure the bowels are helped along during that process until it's all corrected. And interestingly, there is a correlation between thyroid function and bowel dysbiosis, which is interesting. Again, so talk to your naturopath about your hypothyroid. It's really important to get the thyroid optimized, and there's so much we can do naturopathically to help correct any hypothyroid or hyperthyroid. And if you think about it, hypo is slowing down the thyroid. It leads to constipation. Often with hyperthyroid or overactive thyroid, we end up with loose bowels. Not all the time, because there's many things that are playing in here. Depression. So here's our serotonin deficiency. And we need adequate serotonin in the gut, and serotonin is made predominantly in the gut to produce a healthy bowel movement. So if you are experiencing depression, you may find that your evacuation isn't optimal, and again, you may want to look at that. Now, there's an inverse relationship with the microbiome, can also cause depression. Mineral imbalances can cause depression. So you can see by checking in on all these things, we can actually resolve the overlying or underlying health issues. Now let's talk about some of the more sinister ones. Now, bowel cancer. Now, I've experienced bowel cancer myself, and so you can be really, really healthy and still get bowel cancer. In my case, there were genetics involved. Nobody could diagnose me because I was so healthy, but I did have bowel cancer, and I did end up having to have bowel surgery. But basically, anything that blocks the bowel, think about the plumbing. If you've got something blocking it, whether it's a tumor, whether it's an impaction of stool, or a polyp, even if there are enough of them, or sometimes we can have, as I have experienced, a deformity in the bowel that then leads to a secondary blockage. So if you notice that your bowel movement is very skinny, like a snake, or it's flat like a sort of a ribbon type effect, anything that's other than that lovely round Cavendish banana that we talked about, please visit your medical practitioner and have that investigated. There are plenty of other different diseases and diagnoses that can impact on bowels, and also imbalances of hormonal changes can impact on bowels. So if you're having trouble with hormone imbalance, more than likely they'll have an impact on the bowels. This can really happen when we hit menopause and andropause. So we get a drier bowel movement. So we've really got to make sure that we're well hydrated and we're having enough fatty acids. Fibroids can affect bowels. Endometriosis can affect bowels. Diverticulitis, which is the inflammation of a pocket in the bowels. So having diverticuli, which are little pockets in the bowel that then get infected, all of that can affect bowel movements and needs optimizing as far as management. Diabetes, slowing down of our metabolism. So when we age, where our muscle contraction isn't necessarily as strong. Parkinson's, lupus, scleroderma, MS, all sorts of diseases can affect bowel movements, but all can be managed. The bowel movement can be managed no matter what your diagnosis is. Medications, pain medications, NSAIDs can all drive constipation. So whenever you do take a pharmaceutical, consider integrative care with a naturopath that can put some things in place to minimize or negate any of the negative outcomes. But let's talk about what we can do if we think we might be experiencing constipation. So there's no one size fits all. That's really important to know. So having an individualized approach brings best outcomes, but the foundation needs to be there, 4 to 6 handfuls of vegetables. And if you aren't able to consume vegetables or types of fibers, we might need to put in place a supplement short term to keep those bowels healthy. Adequate hydration, so 2 litres of water again, but if you've got a secondary health issue that might need adjusting, again, you need to speak to your naturopath about that. There are many herbal remedies now that can keep the bowels open. We want to make sure though that they're not just a band-aid approach, because even using a herbal remedy for too long can create a lazy bowel. So many people may have heard of senna, cascara, even eating prunes, having a lot of fruit, but they can, if overused, create problems with the bowel longer term. Magnesium oxide can move the bowels, but again can create problems with upper digestion because it's so hard. Magnesium citrate's another popular one, magnesium sulfate. But many of these, when used in excess too often, can create other problems in our digestion. What's better is to test your calcium magnesium, make sure that they're at the right optimal levels, so we've got that contraction and relaxation possible for your bowels. Looking at the appropriate nervous system balance. So serotonin, we've got a wonderful herb derivative called 5-HTP. If the serotonin is low, it helps with mood, but also helps with bowel movements. The appropriate exercises for you. So that's very important. So exercise plays a role in our mood, in our bowel movements, in our upper digestion, all of that. So please, let's check out the mood and look at what we need to do to help lift your mood, but also to help with the bowel movements. So let us know if there's anything that needs adjusting as far as that's concerned. Now, you can actually download the Bristol Stool Chart online. These are little pads that I've got from Movicol, the pharmaceutical company that produces pharmaceuticals to help move the bowels. So I often suggest people have that on the back of their toilet so they can check out what's going on and go, oh, maybe I didn't drink enough water yesterday. Yeah. And maybe I should be worried or concerned, and make an appointment with your naturopath or your medical practitioner, depending on the pathway you want to go down for treatment. So there are lots and lots of different things to look at and investigate. I mentioned some tools. We can test SIBO, we can test the actual stool to see what the microbiome is doing. That's really helpful for a lot of optimal wellness aspects, and many different things that we can investigate. Hair tissue mineral analysis to check on what the tissue calcium magnesium is to make sure it's optimal for you. And if you do have any health issues like hypothyroidism, etc., it's good to have them treated as well. So I hope that's been helpful. If you're watching this on replay, please still pop your questions in. Just tag me if you want my input on any of these things. If there's anything that you want to chat directly with me about in relation to your health, please feel free to reach out privately. My clinic is thebodyguard.com.au. You can book online. I treat worldwide via telehealth, so very similar to this, only you and I are having a chat. It's all highly secured these days. And yes, so no matter where you are, you can get health. Even if you can't leave your home, you can get help with your health and your bowel movements. So I hope that's been helpful. I look forward to chatting to you again about other health and wellness topics. So please let me know if there's a topic that you're interested in me chatting about. Always happy to meet with you on this platform. It's a wonderful group. I hope that you're getting the help that you need. And believe me, working with your health is a fantastic investment for everything. So please drink that water, eat those vegetables, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Have a great day.